Hey nerds, I'm Will Wheaton, and you're watching TrekCulture.
Going back to the early 2000s, I do kind of, there's definitely, I have mentors. I feel like one of my, just by virtue of age, I'm 42 now, and the sort of elder millennials as we are, I feel like in society serve this like interesting role of like connecting the analog past and the digital future. And so a lot of my inspirations, like I didn't really know, I knew I wanted to be a creative person since I was very, very young. And I guess I was making things you would call fan fiction just because I was sort of bored in public school and etc. So I was always, and I'll talk about my own Star Trek origin story. Is I, for some reason, had a stepfather who was upset, thought that like collecting like all of the Star Trek episodes on VHS would somehow be worth something. So and we had a VCR that would not, like, if you press record, it wouldn't like stay recorded. So I had to just like hold it down, coming home from school, holding down record, and like basically that's how I watched all of Next Generation. So at any rate, you go through life, and I want to get into a creative field, and I didn't really come from an artistic family, so I didn't have a lot of direction of what to do, and maybe I want to be a writer, maybe I want to get into film, and sort of in the film school part of the journey, sort of by happenstance, ended up with like the sound department, just sort of like shadowing some people collecting field recorded sound. I was like, this is so cool. And then it took that, after that experience, I got myself a portable sound recorder, which at that point in time were still pretty exotic and pretty new. It was still, DAT, if anybody remembers it. I know not quite old enough to have had to chop tape, but yeah. And then it was another friend in college who turned me on to sort of both old time radio dramas, 1940s and 50s American drama, but then the BBC Lord of the Rings, and then of course like Dirk Mag stuff with Superman and Batman and Judge Dredd and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and all these things that were using audio in really innovative ways. And so that I just was totally in love with the medium from that point forward, and sort of started my very earliest works in the early 2000s were taking short stories I'd written, translating them to audio, and then and originally it was sort of on my local college radio station, but then it was pretty clear that a Thursday 1 o'clock in the afternoon show in a small town is probably not reaching an enormous number of listeners, and so this concept of like a podcast had just sort of been talked about. And I'm also a little bit of a geek, so I learned, at that point in time, you still had to basically hand code XML to post an RSS feed, and I figured out how to launch my own web server and just started putting things out there. And then 20 years passed and I'm working on Con, and so we can fill in some gaps, but that's where we started, and this is where it's going. And I will say, because we may talk about lots of things in this chat, but like there's such a like tumultuous industry, there's so much going on in entertainment. It sounds like on some level, like I don't quite understand how like a lot of the studio forces seem to have lost the plot, but like when you hear about just how there's a struggle in Hollywood and what's the future of this and the future of that, like I hope that Con and it so far has been received really well, becomes launches many more projects like it, both in Star Trek and other franchises. But also, if no one ever hired me again, Con is my like PhD thesis of like what you can do in audio storytelling. And if this is the only thing anybody ever hears, like I'll have served a purpose on this earth. So there we go.
Look, in some respects, I can understand. Like, if I ever had a walk-on part in a Star Trek episode, I'd be like, "That's it. I can retire. I'm done.
Yeah.
I've been in Star Trek. That's fine with me." But I mean, it's because this is a big project. It is absolutely a official CBS. When I think we've been very used to one style of storytelling for a very long time, which of course is visual. And all of our previous version, and that's not, of course, to discount the novel universe and the audiobooks therein. But our main versions of Can, if you like, have been, of course, Ricardo Montalban and Benedict Cumberbatch. And of course, I know he appeared as a child in Star Trek Strange New Worlds as well. So how daunting is it? You're a TNG fan, so you know the legacy of Khan. Like, this is a kind of all of the villains in Star Trek. Most people outside of Star Trek probably have heard of Khan in some way. When this project comes to you, and if you could speak as well a little bit about how the project came to you, what was that initial feeling? Was it like excellent, or was it, oh, mother of God?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah, it's certainly a bit of both. I think part of what kind of keeps me oriented is just sort of trusting the work. And so I think one of the really key creative partnerships on this was working very closely with Kirsten Beyer, and I'm very grateful that she ultimately, you'll hear her credited as an EP, and we worked very hand in glove throughout this, and in a large way, the show is sort of her, a lot of what you hear is sort of her vision, and I felt like my role, it's sort of like when you hear about television producers, like they're not the showrunner, television directors rather, they're not like the showrunner, but they're there to take the thing and make it the best version of that thing within their own creative powers. And so, yeah, it wasn't like Fred Greenhalgh has something to say about Star Trek, and that's my role in this project. My role on the project is to say, okay, is to hear what everybody wants this to be, and to use my my skills to help bring that to life. So, yeah, initially that took the shape of just like this sort of like the high level table setting. So, Alex Kurtzman was also quite involved in this at different points, and so I got to have that was. I mean, it was a very cool meeting, but it was also like, oh my gosh, we're going to be in like Alex Kurtzman and like secret hideout in like their secret, Star Trek land. And, but yeah, we just sort of talked about what can audio do and what is the possibility of audio. And there are things you haven't heard yet that are uniquely challenging sound design set pieces that they knew from the beginning would need a really, really, high caliber, best of the best team to execute. And, we had come to that meeting prepared with thoughts on how you would accomplish certain things, and even like our composer Marcus Bagala had done a sort of demo track to sort of set tonally. This is the sort of vibe that we think might work for Con, because I think we had a chance, heavily NDA'd to look at those unproduced teleplays. So we kind of had a lot has changed since those times, but there's a certain sensibility and tone that I would say is intact, that is still in it. And so amazingly, yeah, like this like demo track made 3 years ago is still largely what's in the show. So yeah, so I think that's sort of where it started there. Throughout the writing process, again, maybe there would be times where I might give notes that were character or but not to give Star Trek notes, but usually it would be to give audio notes of like, this bit, I'm not sure it's going to totally work exactly as written, but could we have a line that does this, or might we approach it this way, or just sort of a person to make sure that the thing that got out there did what we needed it to do, which is like I see comments on like the official YouTube where people are saying, I had no idea that this would make any sense to me, but I found it really easy to follow. Or, like I think to me that's the most gratifying part is like, we sort of knew that like hardcore Trekkies would listen to this because we feel a sense of obligation. They were not obligated to like it, and also, people who had some familiarity of Con the film, could be like, who haven't engaged in a Star Trek property in a long time, could press play, and they're not going to get every reference, but they could follow the story. And so a lot of my job was, I think really it was a very tricky job, because it was both make it wide appeal, but also really specific appeal, and also to sometimes say, because it is true that the show was edited. There's cut scenes, there's cut lines, and there's things that aren't in it, and so there was a lot of tightening and making sure that every moment and every scene is sort of load bearing for the thing we're trying to do, and and just sort of make it all cohere. So at any rate, that was the development process, and then that goes into production. And production was managing we have a whole casting team. But then we also have a lot of stakeholders. As you mentioned, we have the CBS, we have Paramount, we have both the creative people on those teams as well as the marketing people on those teams who have perhaps sometimes aligned, sometimes not totally aligned goals, as well as the creative end on Secret Hideout and those folks, and then also sort of like me and Kirsten, and I might have, because I certainly played a big role in the sense that, like, I think to focus on Naveen for a moment, Naveen to me was like always sort of a no-brainer. I think it was definitely from day one, this has got to be a South Asian guy. This is no question, the end. And then when you sort of have that filter, like, well, who out there could carry Khan? And it's a sort of a short list. And when you looked at the short list, it's like, it's got to be Naveen. Come on, like, so luckily he was into it. And then frankly, we sort of built the rest of the cast around him as sort of the center of our little galaxy here. He had or our planet. He had this sort of gravitational pull to sort of build up from there. So anyway, so I've talked for a moment. That's a little bit of how it got going.
Marla MacGyver's was something of, how do I say that? Never had the opportunity to be a very fully fleshed out character, I think maybe is the fairest way to say it. Yes. So here, you have to go, well, how did we get from this character to Khan mourning his beloved wife? And already we're seeing in these two, there is so many layers going on here. And I suppose one of my questions is what was the process there with Ren of sort of really finding that character?
Yeah. I mean, Ren is immensely talented and just got her. And again, it's all on the page. So I think, yeah, she was as I recall, a Star Trek newbie. So we had a meeting, Hermie Kirsten, I think someone from Secret Hideout came to say hi as well. And sort of, we have a sort of a chat about, what do you want to know? And then, you've got Kirsten there to be like, I can go as deep as we want to go. We can keep it sort of here. And I think we did, do the sort of survey of like this character, what we know and what we don't know. And then what in the version of what we don't know or don't know yet, what we're trying to, what we're hoping might be achieved in this version of the portrayal. And that was just like click, 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 click. And yeah, I think when you're actually there in the recording booth, I think there's a lot to do. We recorded like the 90 or maybe the whole first pass of her performance in like 3 days, which is that's just sort of how these podcasts work. And so you spend time. It's like, does this feel right? Does this feel right? And we try different things, but I think once we kind of felt like the first half of the first day, feeling out that, okay, this is the right take on her, or this is the version of her that's working, then it was kind of almost, not to say it was easy, but like there were like, we didn't ask these questions of ourselves, like, are we like interpreting the scene correctly? Because it was like, oh no, now I think we've sort of found her, and this is sort of like, now that you are like just sort of embodying her, go. And that to me, that's like the funnest part of it is I mean, the bright side, there's a creative limitation imposed by the tight recording schedule, which is also an opportunity, which is that you don't get to become you're not afforded the opportunity to overthink things. So you sort of come to a view of like, this is what we're bringing into the world for this take on it, and let's just go. And now we go, and we sort of exist as much as possible in a sort of flow state of play. And of course, we take takes that we need, and we play around with different things, but we try to stay basically like working. And the fun part is that there's no camera to wait for. It's just like we just go. We're just like and I think sometimes actors think because they're used to like 10-12 hour days or longer on set, and so they think, oh, like a 4-hour recording session, this is going to be easy. It's like, no, you're like in it 4 hours straight. It's actually surprisingly intense. And there's this whole other aspect of having to, if you're an actor who like is used to using really subtle facial gestures to imply emotion or feelings, that's really that can actually be really challenging in audio. It's like, oh no, I got to do that all with my voice now. And someone like with Naveen, he just instantly could just such a range of what he could do. Then there'd be things like, then there's like Tim Russ with Tuvok. You're like, oh, a Vulcan, how is he gonna like do that like eyebrow raise that suggests that he's not totally sure about this? But in audio, there's little things like that you're like, oh, okay, this is in a visual. We're not in a visual format, so we have to make it do the thing that's going to communicate to the audience what we need to say, but you can't use all the same tricks that you're used to doing on screen.
That is fascinating because again, the challenge and the opportunity of it as well, particularly for say someone like Tim Russ who has spent so long playing Tuvok to a camera. But I mean, there must have been so many tricks that he brought from just knowing the character so well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say on some level it's easy because like we're sort of like, well, Tim, there's really not much to like say because you know the character far better than I ever will. I think the one thing that he wanted to be comfortable with was feeling that like the words felt like Tuvok, and I think that was a yes. Like I think that was. I remember, we'd sent the scripts ahead of the first time we got to meet him before we recorded, and that was like one of Kirsten's first questions is like, yeah, does this like because if any line doesn't sound like Tuvok, like I will change it, and he was like, no, this feels like Tuvok, and which I think probably feels like a good compliment when, you can write for the character and he gets it and he's not like, would Tuvok really say this? Come on.
How many of the cast were able to record in person together?
Essentially none. No, this was all very intimate, one-on-one, and with Kirsten, so maybe three parties, and maybe sometimes like another person from production. So, yeah, it's very. I mean, it could work different ways. Like you had alluded to earlier. Like my very early projects were taking actors out on location like a film and recording all of a piece, which is an amazing way to record it, and you get something very special when people actually go into a physical location and play through it. And then there's of course the studio version of that, and that's sort of how the vast majority of BBC radio dramas are made, with I think the kind of constellation of parts on this in terms of like the amount of a lot of it just comes down to people's schedules, and it just very and you have like a somewhat merciless production calendar, and so the feasibility of like, well, this person's available for those 2 Thursdays, but this person is in this movie and the movie only has this window, so I think as a director I've gotten I remember that I've done so much in-person work that I just have a sense of, and I guess I'm the keeper of that. I'm the keeper of like all the previous performances, so that when we're in recording with somebody, it needs to match what somebody else did, and there's a bit of an art to, I don't know, like that. Yeah, there was never a moment where we're like, these people feel like they're in 2 different shows. What happened? Because like that's really my job, is to sort of keep the whole show in my head, which does take up some processing power, and and I think it is, I don't know, there's something about it that is, it obviously, if we had the time to put Ren and Naveen together, we'd probably get something even possibly more special than what we have, but I feel like it's also like there's something very, very intimate about it's really just sort of us in this room and really quietly being able to craft something together. So to me, it's not a detriment. It's just sort of like I said with the time limitation, it's like you can take a creative limit or creative boundary and use it as a power, and that's how I look at it.
I think it has to be like the best way to look at it, because I can't remember when I first sort of began to understand how things like this were made, that it wasn't people sitting in a room doing a table read, and then it becomes almost more interesting that you do get those nuanced reactions as well, against someone who might be 1,000 miles away from you.
Yeah, well, I will say, what we don't do is what they do, I think, in a lot of games or possibly in animation, where they sort of like everybody sort of like says their lines and moves along. Like we definitely play it as scenes, and so and we do still approach it in a sort of similarly as if we were going to do live action. Like, okay, look, this is the part of the story that we're in. This is sort of like the stage action, and if in your mind's eye, we talk through staging of and you're going to be here, and if we were on camera, you would kind of we'd sort of shoot it like this, and then at this point, Khan's going to storm in, and and like all those things make it. I sort of try to plant those in the cast members' imagination, so that when they play it, it doesn't really, it never feels like they're just sort of like reading lines. It feels like they're approaching it the same way they would a dramatic performance, which is on some level is like harder because you're in a recording booth, which is rather, beige, and you're wearing headphones, and you're not in costume, and all that. But I obviously that the actors are at such a level of talent that they're very good at playing make believe.
Thank you so much for watching this abbreviated version of this podcast. Now, if you go to our audio platforms, you will get the full version of this podcast with this guest. So we really, really appreciate you subscribing to that, and you're just awesome and wonderful. Thank you so much.